Welcome to the November 16th edition of Octagon Outlook. I am your host, James Lynch, here on Line Movement, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, my good friend. You know him over at TSN. He's their lead MMA reporter, Aaron Bronsteter, joining me here on the program. Aaron, how's it going?
I'm great, James. Always appreciate being on your show, being on any of your platforms. You're the hardest working guy in the business, and that's why I always enjoy speaking with you. Plus, you're a great guy, and you're into video games, and we like to hang out. So, lots of great reasons to spend time with you.
I was telling my producer Jordan off air that anytime we go cover an event, which we haven't this year, you and I together, we always hang out and do the video games or hang out in general. So it's great to get you on here on the program. And I know Dan Tom, of Line Movement as well, is always on your Periscope show as well. So a lot of connections here to Line Movement and TSN as well. Before we get into recapping UFC Vegas 14, want to mention to our audience, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We're always looking to grow the channel as much as we can. You're going to find all my best interviews here on the Live Movement YouTube channel. Appreciate all the support. Let's get into it. UFC Vegas 14, Rafael dos Anjos getting a split decision win over Paul Felder. I thought that should have been a unanimous one. We'll talk about Chris Lee in a sec, but Aaron, first off, what did you think of RDA, moving back down to lightweight for the first time since 2016? I thought he put forth a very good effort against a guy in Paul Felder who was training for a triathlon and still put on a pretty good fight himself.
RDA looked great, but here's the thing about RDA that I think a lot of people were overlooking going into this fight. A lot of people thought he was damaged goods. They looked at his recent record and they thought that he just wasn't the same RDA. The issue with RDA is that his kryptonite was takedowns. And I think that had he fought Islam Makhachev this past weekend, that would have been exposed once more. The only guy I think that has really good takedowns that wasn't able to expose that was Kevin Lee when Rafael dos Anjos beat him. I think that was in Rochester, New York, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. I remember I was at that one. It was one of the rare times I actually sat cage side for one of the fights. So that one sticks into my head. But I think that when you look at RDA and you put him up against someone like Felder, someone who's not really going to threaten much with the takedown, that's where RDA is going to continue to shine in his career. The big issue for RDA is once he starts fighting these great wrestlers again, I think that they're going to expose him. Although that said, Makhachev was like a 6-1 favorite. And if you would have said that he was going to be a 6-1 favorite now after watching that RDA performance, I don't think he would be. I think that he'd probably be a much smaller favorite. We know what Islam Makhachev can do, but we don't know how, if he can do it against the highest levels of competition. I mean, this would have been the biggest step up in his career. I thought that line was way off, personally. I think Makhachev, of course, should have been the favorite, but now I feel like I'm justified in that thought, given how good RDA just looked. I mean, he just looked incredible. And I think that if you put him against fighters like that, if you put him against the Justin Gaethje, you put him against the Michael Chandler, you put him against some of these more striking-based fighters, you're going to see him be able to perform just like that.
I'm with you there. And I think the one thing, as well, I was sort of on the train as well, prior to the Makhachev switch up, that RDA wasn't this guy who was finished. I mean, you got to look at who he's fighting, Aaron, as well. I mean, Michael Chiesa, Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, these are ranked fighters in the welterweight division up a weight class. And in between there, like you mentioned, is a win over Kevin Lee, who last time I checked was back at lightweight. I mean, it's not like he was fighting a guy that was much bigger than him. So you saw obviously him get the win in that fight as opposed to before. But you bring up a good point about the wrestling. I sort of feel the same way that, if he does face like a superior wrestler, it could be interesting. But, conversely, Islam Makhachev, that was by far the toughest opponent that he had fought to date, I would think, in a former UFC champion in Dos Anjos, in terms of the experience of who he was fighting, and also just a guy that, even at his age right now at 36, does not look like he's slowing down anytime soon. So I'd be curious to see if they're going to go that route and rebook that fight, because I thought it made sense at the time. If you're trying to build up Islam Makhachev, what's the best way to do it? You get him to fight a former UFC champion. So I think that could make sense. But I mean, now with this win, there's a lot of different options in terms of matchups. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. But also, Paul Felder says he's not retiring. He wants to continue. What do you think is next for both guys, just off the top of your head?
Yeah, that Felder comment surprised me. It was like right after the fight. He hadn't been in an MMA gym, by his own words, in 4 months. So now suddenly he's reinvigorated to continue his career, because I guess he must have had a lot of fun in there with RDA. So that surprised me. And then in terms of what next for RDA, I think it should be Makhachev. I think you just make that fight again. You rebook it. I think now you have added more momentum to Rafael dos Anjos, that if Makhachev is able to beat him, it actually gives him more momentum, more steam. I think that had he beaten RDA before that win over Felder, it wouldn't have given him as much momentum as it would now. So I think that should be the next opponent for RDA. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read that it was an infection that took Makhachev out. Yeah,
I believe. Yeah.
So if that's the case, you can rebook that pretty soon. And I think that Rafael dos Anjos will probably want to get back in there. I think you just rebook that as a main event on a fight night card. It's a good fight. And now I think it's an even better fight, knowing that RDA does still have something left in the can. In terms of Felder, that's a good question, because now he's moved down in the rankings, right? So you have to look at the lower half. I mean, maybe a Kevin Lee, if you want to get Kevin Lee kind of back on track and try to get him back on track. I think that's a great matchup. I think Felder would actually have a lot of advantages. You could do the rematch with Charles Oliveira. The last person to beat Charles Oliveira was Paul Felder. I think there are a couple good options that you could give Felder for a comeback fight. I mean, really, I said this on Saturday. When was the last time that a main event lightweight fight has disappointed? And the one that somebody gave me that I think might be the last time it has was Gray Maynard against Clay Guida. I think it was like 8 years ago. So, I mean, that one might be the last disappointing lightweight main event that we've seen in the UFC. So really, you can mix and match any of these guys. You can take a hat, you can put the top 15 names in there, and you can draw them. And I think you're going to get a great matchup regardless of who pops up.
And a lot of things happen on this card as well leading in. You talked about the main event delivering. We ended up with 9 fights with a lot of, fights not taking place. Eric Anders off the card, Louis Smolka off the card, Julian Marquez's opponent off the card, Safarov, he's off there. So, I mean, this had a lot working against it. But I think for the 9 fights we did get, we got pretty much entertained the whole night. And we'll obviously sort of talk about the rest of the card here as well. But I thought, overall, this was one of those good cards that, I think didn't get much respect heading in, including the co-main event, Aaron. I got this 100% wrong. Did not expect this. Chaos Williams, this guy definitely living up to his name, getting a knockout win over Razak Al-Hassan, which surprised me because Al-Hassan's a tough guy to finish, even at his age at 35. I thought if this stood standing, I'd give the edge to Al-Hassan, but the way he knocked him out too, just that, and Al-Hassan going basically stiff and Williams walking away, it was just an unbelievable knockout. All the credit to him. He's now 11-1. I worried about the level of competition heading into the UFC with Chaos Williams. That has not been a factor. He's now knocked out 2 Fortis MMA fighters, and Alex Morono, and now Abdul Razak Al-Hassan. I think you got to build off this if you're the UFC and get this guy back at a fight as soon as possible. That is Chaos Williams. And Razak Al-Hassan, ever since the outside the cage issues, I know that they ended up clearing all that up, but he has not been the same fighter. He's looked not very so good, and he missed weight again in this fight. So just your thoughts on this fight, because I think this was a great fight for Chaos Williams to emerge as a potential dark horse in this division.
Yeah, I wasn't sold on Al-Hassan coming into this one. I mean, he missed weight, and once you get out of the first round with Al-Hassan, he tends to slow down. This one, it didn't even need to get out of the first round. I mean, Chaos Williams, this guy's got legit power. Now he enters into the kind of that Joaquin Buckley stratosphere where you can kind of match him and hope that you're able to get something good out of him. I know Buckley's fighting this coming weekend against Beverly Hills Ninja, Jordan Wright. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of Chaos Williams, because I think this is a good action fighter. I think you pair him up with somebody that's of that same ilk, somebody that's going to swing with him. But you look at Khamzat Chimaev and this debutant who's just destroying guys as a huge favorite. It's the complete opposite with Chaos Williams. He was an underdog. I think he was a plus 300 or maybe even more underdog against Alex Morono. And we saw how good Morono looked this past weekend. And then an underdog again. I think Al-Hassan opened around the minus 300 favorite against Chaos Williams. And that line tended to tighten. I think a lot of people had the same concerns about Al-Hassan as I did. But as a result of that, now you've got this newcomer that's starching guys as a big underdog. And that's a great story in and of itself. And that was one of the better KOs of the year. I mean, it's not going to live up to the Buckley hype, but the way that he stiffened Al-Hassan with that shot, I mean, wow. I don't think anybody saw that coming, especially that early in the fight when Al-Hassan's at his absolute most dangerous. So I think Chaos Williams is somebody we have to keep an eye on. And somebody that if they match up well, and there's a lot of good matchups in that division, that would be solid stylistic matchups for him. We're going to see a lot of interesting things to come from Chaos Williams.
I think with Williams, you give him someone on that fringe top 15, like a Rocco Martin, like a Bilal Muhammad, who lost his opponent coming up here soon. Those are the type of fights I think that make sense. And for Al-Hassan, it's prospects from here on out. I mean, we know he's not a contender anymore. He's obviously lost, back-to-back fights now. Like a Reese McKee or that type of fight against an up-and-comer, I think makes a lot of sense here, just because he doesn't seem, and I even wonder if they're going to let him compete at welterweight now that he's, had back-to-back losses. He might have to go back up to middleweight. So we'll see, or should go to middleweight, I should say, in this fight. So we'll sort of see what the matchmaking is going forward. But this was a great gift for the UFC in this co-main event, just with the finish. And like you said, highlight reel worthy as well. Let's keep moving on. We're going to the women's strawweight division. This was probably the one fight on the card where you're kind of like, didn't really live up to I think what people wanted it to. There's that really weird photo. If you see it, it was circulating on social media where they're kind of like intertwined like a pretzel here, but it is Ashley Yoder getting the win. I felt like her experience was going to pay dividends in this fight. It certainly did. She looked really good in this fight. I thought nice bounce back from her last fight, which was a loss. And Miranda Granger, I mean, she had a full camp. She had everything going into this fight, but it wasn't enough. I think, I figured the fight before might have been one where, had bad travel and all that. Maybe we can write that as like a one-off, but she clearly lost this fight. I know the judges, I think it was Bruce Buffer, would read the scorecard wrong, or there was some issue there where Yoder, was a little bit confused, but I thought Yoder looked good. Still can, pick up wins here at 33 years old in the strawweight division. What do you think's next for her, Aaron? What did you think of her performance? Oh, I think Aaron might be muted here. Oh, we'll double check. Either way, I'll keep rambling on until we get Aaron back here. This is live programming as we're getting through this. But no, I just thought that for Yoder, I mean, it's always been the same case with her. She either like loses a close fight or wins a close fight. In this case, I thought this was a little bit more decisive. And for Miranda Granger, like, there's a lot of promise of her going in. She was undefeated. Now that's back-to-back losses. I don't really know where she goes from here because I think Yoder was sort of a good test to see where she fit. Obviously, she failed that test. I wonder if a switching camp might be worth it. I know I believe her parents live in Las Vegas. Might be worth it to maybe try going out to Vegas and getting a different look over there in terms of a camp switch up. And I know her camp was limited as well, being in Washington State, didn't have sort of the same training partners that she's used to. So we'll see what happens there. But Yoder, I think you see a lot of the work she's done, not only from going to different camps, working at San Diego Combat Academy, to working with a sports psychologist. Whatever she's doing, it is definitely working out. And I'm excited to see this new Ashley Yoder that we saw on Saturday going forward. Aaron, do we got you back here? Oh, no, we still don't have Aaron on the audio, unfortunately, but it's okay. That's why they hired me to do this. I can carry the load here in the meantime here. We'll get Aaron's thoughts in a second on some of these other fights, but I'll continue on here. We've got Sean Strickland getting the TKO win over Brendan Allen in the second round. This was an impressive win. Brendan Allen, I believe that it's his first TKO loss. I know he's been submitted on the regional scene against Trevin Giles, but to get finished the way he did, super impressive in terms of what he was able to put forward. And Strickland looks like an absolute animal at 185. So that's something that's really interesting to look at in terms of what Strickland was able to do. Because like I said, Brendan Allen very durable, and for Strickland to go out there and do it, I do wonder one thing about this fight. And every fighter is different, but I remember when the Heinisch fight got canceled, and Allen sort of put a tweet out saying, Look, I don't think I'm going to fight till next year. He'd been away from his family. He had this whole training camp in Florida. Looking back on that now, that might have played some weight in there. Maybe mentally he wasn't really in there. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Sean Strickland in the fight, but I do wonder if, Brendan Allen, maybe, just losing that Heinisch fight, having everything focused on that and then taking this fight might have lost a little bit of focus in this one. But nonetheless, I don't want to take anything away from Sean Strickland. This guy is now someone to keep an eye on at 185. I don't think he'll get ranked after this one, but certainly a win like this, finishing a guy in Brendan Allen, I think he's a fight or two away from getting ranked, and then we can start talking about him, wrecking havoc in that division, because I think it's very interesting to see what he's been able to do at 185. And speaking to him before the Jack Marshman fight, Sean Strickland told me about just how much of a cut it was. So I think him, not having to focus as much on the weight cut to make 170, I think he's looking outstanding here. And look at this, 22-3 record now. He has won, what is it here, in his last couple fights. If Tapology pulls up his record here, he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. The one loss to Zaleski in there. I think this guy is someone to keep an eye on for sure. Aaron, do we got you back now? We fixed it.
Hear me?
Yeah, we got him now. There we go. We'll take a step. Let's talk about this Allen first, and then I'll get your thoughts on the Yoder fight after. But what do you think of Strickland's win over Brendan Allen?
I thought it was a statement win for him. I wasn't certain that he was going to do well against Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen's a fantastic prospect and somebody who I think is good just about everywhere. I thought if it got to the ground, that would be more Allen's world. But man, I was throwing jabs yesterday with my with the heavy bag in my basement. I was like, man, I wish I could throw a jab like Sean Strickland. Like, that guy throws just an absolutely mean jab. And, the people that throw the absolute best jabs are the ones that can catch you on the very end of their punch. Amanda Nunes can do that. Sean Strickland's one of those guys where he catches you right at the very end of his punch. And that's where I think if you looked at Allen early on in that fight, I think it was in the first minute, you could see him starting to swell up. And that's how good Sean Strickland is. His striking is kind of awkward in the way that it looks, but man, is it effective. And I think that this is a guy who wants to continue to stay active. He had that long layoff after the motorcycle accident. And I don't know if you listen to my podcast, but Bazooka Joe Valtellini, my co-host, said he was in Vegas with Malcolm Gordon prior to his last fight. And they were at the Performance Institute. And they said that Sean Strickland was looking to spar with just about anybody there. He was walking around saying, hey, will you spar with me? Will you spar with me? They went to a Starbucks drive-thru like a day later. And they pulled up, and the guy who gave them the coffee was like, yeah, I had amateur boxing experience, and this guy came, and he asked me if I wanted to come spar with him. He said, was it like a tall bald guy? And they're like, yeah, it was that guy. It was Sean Strickland was trying to like get the baristas from Starbucks to come and spar with him. Like, this guy's always in the gym. He's always sparring. And it's nice to see him active again. But that was a really great performance by him. And I hope Brendan Allen can rebound. I think he's still got a lot of upside at his young age.
Certainly does. I can verify that story is true because Dan Tom literally told that exact story here on the Line Movement Betting Show a couple weeks ago. So yeah, Strickland, he's a wild card. I had to do an interview with him before the Marshman fight, and I had to cut out like a good chunk of it because he was just going off on a bunch of different stuff that wasn't exactly PG. So yeah, but huge win. And I'm with you, Aaron. This is a guy to keep an eye on at 185. For Brendan Allen, I think the biggest thing is him taking some time off. He became a dad this year, being away from his family in Florida, training over there. I think he just needs some time off and recuperate and get back in there. No shame in losing. Allen's lost before in his career. It's not like we're talking about an undefeated prospect. Giles beat him on the regional scene. Eric Anders beat him on the regional scene. Anthony Hernandez beat him as well. So he's had adversity before. He'll come back even stronger, I think. But I do like him at Sanford MMA. I think that's a good fit for him going forward, and we'll see if he can build off that from this loss. Let's take a look at the last fight on the main card. Corey McKenna getting the edge over Kay Hansen on the main card. I scored this one for Kay Hansen, but curious to get your scorecards because it was a close fight. I won't say it was a robbery, but I definitely thought Hansen edged this one out. Which way did you go in this one, Aaron?
Yeah, it's weird. I had a 30-27 Hansen, but when they gave it to McKenna, I wasn't like super upset about it. It's one of those ones where you have three very close rounds, and I personally thought that Hansen had all three. I thought that she did more. I thought she landed the more effective strikes. I thought that she landed, she had more top control. I know that that's not necessarily the best way of scoring that fight. And I know Sean Sheehan, who is a major stickler when it comes to the scoring criteria and judging based on the criteria, was very happy with McKenna getting the win. So maybe I'll defer to him because he is more well-versed on the scoring criteria than I am. But I personally had all three rounds for Hansen. And that said, I'm not super upset about it. I think that a lot of people had it for Hansen. Some people had it for McKenna. I get it. But, I can't be too upset when it's a really close fight where really any round can go any way.
It was one of those fights too, where I think I forget the record it set because they were two very young fighters, obviously both 21. I think, I think it's a good fight to kind of figure out where both belong, and both are top prospects. I think even in a loss, Kay Hansen's stock still went up, and I think both of them are sort of, looking at sort of the future of that division right now. So, I know Hansen lost the fight. I'm sure a lot of people felt like she did win that fight, but either way, I thought it was a good effort regardless. And I think both will maybe fight again in the future, perhaps in a contender spot as the division moves along there. Let's quickly go through the prelims here a little bit. We got to talk about Randa Marcos, unfortunately losing again to Kanako Murata. Murata looked great. Her wrestling was on point. Totally underestimated that ahead of this fight. It didn't matter that Randa had that much more experience. Murata totally pitched a perfect game, in my opinion. Went out there, absolutely took Randa out of her element. Credit to Randa for stepping up on short notice, but that's 3 straight losses now. I think that's probably it for Randa. And, I do wonder what her future holds in MMA in general, because it's not like Bellator's, dying to sign any strawweights or anything like that. Maybe the UFC gives her another fight just as like a loyalty thing, but I think it's probably the end of the road for Randa Marcos from Murata. This is a great win. She'll build off that and go forward. But, Marcos at 35, I do wonder if maybe she's thinking about other things outside the cage, maybe a family. I don't know. But yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the fight and also what you think the future holds for our fellow Canadian Randa Marcos.
I think if Marcos calls it a career on her own, that'll be it for her. But if you look at the facts, she signed a 4-fight contract with the UFC prior to her fight with Mackenzie Dern. She took this fight on very short notice. I think that the UFC should give her another fight because of her stepping up on short notice and taking on an Invicta champion. But all week when I had spoken to Randa Marcos, she said, I need to see if I still belong here. I need to see if I'm still worthy of fighting in the UFC as a strawweight. So she might decide on her own to retire. That said, I think that if she does get another fight, it will be in the UFC because of those circumstances, signing the new 4-fight deal and taking a fight on short notice. She's alternated wins and losses for her entire career up until recently. Now she's lost 3 in a row, as you mentioned. So I'm eager to see what ends up happening next with her.
Yeah, same here. We'll keep tabs, obviously, and see sort of what they decide to do as far as Marcos. But she's been in the UFC forever. She's one of the few fighters from that season that's still on the roster, so to speak. So, yeah, unfortunate news for Marcos. Tony Gravely getting the split decision win over DeFreitas. I had Gravely winning. Didn't really see much of an issue there. Alex Morono getting the decision over Reese McKee. No complaints there. Good to see Morono getting back on the winning track after the last loss. And then opening up the card, Dante Almays finally getting a UFC win, getting the decision over Roque Martinez. Anything stand out to you on those 3 fights?
Morono's volume was really something else. I mean, this guy just was putting it on Reese McKee. And I thought Reese McKee looked okay. Like, I think Reese McKee still can fight in the UFC. I think he used to be a lightweight. And if he can get back down to lightweight, I mean, he would have massive size for that division. I think that would be, that would be in his best interest if he's able to do it safely. But, man, Morono's just got quite a motor on him. I think he threw like 160 significant strike attempts in the first round, something crazy like that. That kind of a motor is very, very difficult to keep up with. So as long as Morono can stay out of firefights and can keep implementing his game plan, he can do really well in the UFC. It's nice to see those guys from Fortis MMA, continue to churn out improving fighters that just continue to improve. And I think Morono is one of those fighters. So we'll see where he goes from here. But that was the one that really stuck out to me. I thought that the Mays and Roque Martinez fight, not much going on there. I mean, it was
you could skip that one if you wanted to on that card.
I think so. I mean, no disrespect to Roque Martinez, but it doesn't seem like he's been put in much of a position to succeed, and it doesn't really seem like he's got much of a future in the UFC. Don'Tale Mayes, I think this was the kind of fight that he needed, a fight that would get him a win and get him some confidence back, and that's exactly what it was.
Now, on Thursday night, we had another Bellator card, and this, to me, Aaron, was one of the best cards we've seen all year from Bellator. Maybe not all year, but even all time. I loved everything about this card. The matchmaking was on point. We got some highlight reel finishes. Aaron Pico getting a highlight reel win again. Emmanuel Sanchez with the dominant win over Daniel Weichel in the co-main event. About as close of a fight as you'll get between Amosov and Storley. Both guys had undefeated records heading into this one. But the main event, Patricio Pitbull getting that finish over Pedro Carvalho. And I know Carvalho had some losses, and I know he hadn't fought the competition as Pitbull, but for Pitbull to finish him as quickly as he did. Aaron, I got to go on a little rant here, man. This guy does not get enough respect from the MMA community, and that is Patricio Pitbull. Everyone's talking about Michael Chandler coming over here. Who was the last guy that beat Michael Chandler? It was Patricio
Easily,
Pitbull.
too.
Yes, exactly. And it wasn't even close in that fight. I was looking at Patricio's record here, and you look at his last couple losses, or all of his losses in general. The loss to Benson Henderson was an injury, and that took place in 2016.
A fluke injury.
Lost to Daniel Strauss, which is a controversial decision or close fight. Pat Curran was a close fight. Joe Warren was a close fight. This guy very well could be through 34 fights, 34-0, and I don't think this guy gets nearly enough respect. I know there's a lot of fans, for whatever reason, want to trash Bellator and say they're second rate or whatever. This guy is a top fighter. I know he didn't fight a world beater in Pedro Carvalho, but the fact he finished him so quickly, Aaron, this guy has got to get more respect from the community in general. He's a double champion. We should be making more of a big deal of this guy right now. He's in the prime of his career right now. He's at 33 years old right now in his career, and he's finishing opponents. He's not just going out there sneaking out a decision here. He is going out there and finishing his opponents. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to the double champ at Bellator, who I think is criminally underrated in MMA. And this idea that he'd go over to the UFC and get destroyed, I disagree. I think he'd hold his own with anyone in the top 5 at featherweight, even potentially lightweight here. Again, not getting maybe the best competition compared to what he get in the UFC, but the fact that he's going out there and dominating his opponents, I think speaks volumes here. And I am very curious to see who he ends up fighting next, with what's coming up in the tournament. But regardless, Patricio Pitbull should be considered one of the best fighters in MMA right now. Your thoughts, Aaron Bronsteter?
After the fight, I said he was a top 10 pound for pound guy in the world, and I stand by that. I think that he's the type of guy where I think he could actually move down to bantamweight. I think that if he tried to make bantamweight, I think he could make it and then become a legitimate triple champion. No disrespect to Triple C. I know one of them is an Olympic medal, which is an MMA championship that's on his resume, but could actually become a 3-division MMA champion, which I think would just be crazy. You look at him at lightweight, and he stopped Michael Chandler in the first round, and he's probably in like more of a bantamweight than he is a lightweight. This guy's just incredibly impressive. And could Bellator have done a better job of setting up that Emmanuel Sanchez versus Patricio Pitbull fight? Sanchez looked so good in that fight. And I was like, wow, this guy might be a dark horse to win this tournament. And then you see how Pitbull performs afterwards. And I mean, Pitbull just looked phenomenal against Carvalho. I mean, it was a 6-1 favorite, but Carvalho earned that spot in the tournament, right? So it's not like they're trying to match him up with easy matchups or anything along those lines. Carvalho earned his place. Now, if you look at, and I mean, not to mention, I should say that Pitbull had to beat Juan Archuleta, the current bantamweight champion, to get to that spot, right? So he beat somebody who's probably an even tougher competition in the first round. And that's why, again, if Patricio wanted to go down to bantamweight and face Archuleta again, I think that would be a big fight. And I think you could make him into a 3-division champion if you booked him that way in Bellator. I'm not sure if that's one of their priorities. I know that a lot of their kind of interdivisional matchups have kind of slowed down some of these divisions, but I'm curious to see what happens in this featherweight tournament. I think the featherweight tournament's been a home run for them. And like you said, I think this was by far their best card of the year. I thought that they had a lot of trouble getting momentum back after this pandemic and having to shut down for that long. I thought this one got the wind right back in their sails. I thought that this was a great event. I thought that the Pico fight was a lot of fun, and that we saw Pico really perform the way that I think he needs to perform going forward. Very well-rounded, utilized his wrestling, utilized his striking as well, utilized the threat of his wrestling to set up his striking, which I think was always the thing that he was never able to do. He was always going one way or the other. He was never wrestling and striking. It was either just full-on wrestling or full-on striking. And I think that now that he's found a balance, he's going to be a very dangerous fighter. I continue to think he's one of the best prospects in the world today. I think that if he can avoid getting into firefights like he has in the past and continue to implement a more well-rounded game, that he's going to be a champion one day in Bellator.
Couple quick things on Bellator, and then we'll move on to the UFC 255 card. I agree with you. I think this Bellator card was amazing, and I'd like to see this matchmaking go, forward with how they're matching up fights. Like in the past couple of years, it's been we got a UFC vet against a Bellator guy. Like I like how now they're really focusing on the talent they have. Like we're going to be seeing AJ McKee and Darion Caldwell come up. I mean, this is about as good as it gets in terms of matchmaking in Bellator. And we talked about the Amosov and Storley fight. Like that's another one, just great matchmaking there. So I would love it if Bellator would stick with this style of matchmaking as opposed to trying to get a name from the UFC and try and get people to view that way, because we can see right through it. We just want good fights. We don't want mismatches or anything along those lines. I mentioned there AJ McKee. I mean, he's another guy that I think the Bellator has in their back pocket along with Pico that could be, the face of the promotion. And I think he could be an interesting matchup for Pitbull because AJ's so young, and every fight we see something different from him, whether it's a knockout or submission. We see his wrestling. Really excited for that upcoming fight there. So yeah, just wanted to give a shout out to Bellator because, like I said, that was one of their best cards we've seen in quite some time in terms of what they put forward. But let's get to UFC 255. We've got 2 title fights coming up here this Saturday. We're going to just preview one fight on the prelims because that's 2 of the guys that I ended up interviewing for Line Movement. You can check them out here on the channel. But a really interesting fight between Jared Gooden and Alan Jouban. If you look right now on blitzbet.eu, which for Canadian users, you can definitely use that. Jared Gooden is actually the underdog at plus 110. Alan Jouban minus 135. The interesting thing, if you watch the interview with Jouban, talking about the injuries and the layoff, but I think people, may forget or may not. He's 38 years old, Aaron. That's not young in this game right now. And you got a guy in Jared Gooden who's 26. Now, the thing I like about Jared Gooden is he lost a couple times on the regional scene, but he's made some adjustments. He's switched camps. He's been training with actually one of his former opponents who he said, flat out, this guy dominated me in the fight. So I wanted to learn from him on how I can get better. And I think that's why you're seeing Gooden in the UFC right now. Now, Gooden was supposed to make his debut against Dwight Grant earlier this year, ended up getting an injury. Wouldn't talk about it in the interview. Don't blame him. Don't want to get any strategy out there. But this is a really good opportunity for Gooden fighting a guy in Jouban who's been off for a while. Definitely Jouban is the rightful favorite here. He's a lot better on paper in terms of what we've seen. But Gooden has the opportunity here to really capitalize on a Jouban who's been off with injury, who lost his last fight. I think he should have edged that one out against Dwight Grant. But there's a lot of intangibles in this upcoming matchup in the welterweight division. Aaron, I want to get your thoughts. Who are you leaning towards in this one? Because my early pick here is Alan Jouban.
Well, first off, I will correct you and say that 38 is actually very young. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
But I'll say that it really just depends on how Jouban looks coming off that layoff. You just never know how fighters are going to look when they're at that age and they're coming back following an injury. I would lean Jouban if Jouban is still, in fact, the Alan Jouban of old, or can at least be similar to the Alan Jouban of old. I don't know too much about Gooden. I've watched some of his stuff from the regional scene. He hasn't yet fought in the UFC, so I'm eager to see what he brings to the table. So it's hard for me to really make a pick without seeing that much of Gooden. I'm going to look at more of his stuff during this week. Usually Monday, I'm not able to get to check out the newcomers just yet. And it's early in the day there on the West Coast for you. So I'm no excuses here. I probably should have looked into some Jared Gooden.
Good, man. I can hold this against you.
It's hard for me to make a big pick on this one or a confident pick, but I would say that if Jouban looks the way that he has looked in the past, that a debuting fighter who has had some rough patches on the regional scene might have some issues with him.
Well, the good news with Gooden as well, and I'll mention this to people who might not be familiar with Gooden, is a lot of his fights are on UFC Fight Pass. He fought for Titan FC a couple times. All their fights are on there. I don't know if LFA moved their library over to UFC Fight Pass. I don't think they did. I think Axis still owns that. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but he fought one time in LFA as well. So there is some footage out there on Jared Gooden. And if not, hit up best fight picks are Dan Levy here on Line Movement. He knows Gooden very well, so I'm sure he could find you guys some footage there as well if you're looking for it. But yeah, I'm with you as well. Just based off, on paper, I would have to go with Jouban, just based after what he's done, the experience and all that. If he looks anything close to what we've seen in the Octagon, I think he probably wins this fight, especially since Gooden's lost a few times in the regional scene. Lost to Bruno Oliveira, who we saw in Contender Series, and also lost to a UFC vet and Mike Graves back in 2019. So keep that in mind as well when you're picking this fight. But let's get to the main card. We are going to start first with the rematch between Mauricio Shogun Hua and Paul Craig. And right now on blitzbet.eu, you can see Mauricio Shogun Hua is the underdog at plus 141. Paul Craig minus 172. That's kind of where I'm leaning here. But Aaron, who you picking in this one?
I'm with you. Paul Craig looked really good in his last fight. And I think you have to always look at the Craig by submission prop. I think that's always his best way to win. That's the thing that he has over everybody else in the light heavyweight division. But if you can get a good prop on, and it's going to sound crazy, but if you can get a good prop on Craig by KO, if it's like 10-1 or something, I think it's worth a flyer because Craig has looked much better in the striking department. And when you have a guy like Shogun who's been in the game for a long time, all it takes is one good shot. And I think that, was it James Tahuna that knocked out Shogun, or was it the other way around? I can't remember.
I think it was Shogun knocking out Tahuna, but I'll double check here.
Yeah, I just know that there have been situations where Shogun has gotten cracked by fighters that, you would think that their striking is not quite as good as Shogun. And I think that Craig, you might be able to get, if you can get like 10, 11-1 on him by KO, I think it's worth a flyer because his striking has improved quite a bit. That being said, the Craig by submission prop is always very exciting to bet on because that's usually how he wins his fights. And I think you'll probably get that around 2-1, 3-1. But just take a look at that KO prop because if it's really high, I would say that it might be worth a stab.
I agree. And Shogun's not getting any younger. He's 38 years old now.
Very young.
Very, very young. I'm not that much younger than you, Aaron, but we can talk honestly here. It's okay. We're getting old. Let's be honest here. But no, I think
UFC, that's for sure.
At
any age, I would say that though.
I was going to say the problem with Shogun as well is he just has these fights where, like you said, he did beat Tahuna, but you're right. He did get hit in that fight. And then the one weird fight that always stands up to me is how he got submitted by Chael Sonnen of all people. It's like, that's one of those, someone should make a list of really weird wins for fighters like Michael Johnson's win over Poirier, things like that, where it's just I think 9 times out of 10, you do that fight, there's probably getting a different result. But no, Shogun at this point, I know he's coming off the win over Pedro. It's a lot of us are nostalgic. We want to see that pride Shogun that we saw for so many years with the soccer kicks, but I don't think that guy exists. Anymore. I think he's lost a step. I should mention actually his last one was the split over Little Nog, but I think Craig inside the distance is probably a good job. You might look at the knockout one as well, but I think this is Craig's fight to lose. That's how I look at this. And I'm with you, Aaron. I think every fight we're seeing a better Paul Craig. The last fight, very impressive. And I think he's got the best jiu-jitsu at 205. So we'll see if he can implement that in this one, but the pick is going to be Paul Craig. All right, let's move along to the women's flyweight division. A really interesting fight here between Katlyn Chookagian and Cynthia Calvillo. And Cynthia Calvillo, I'm a little surprised with this, I'll be honest. A pretty decent favorite here, minus 263 on blitzbet.eu. Katlyn Chookagian, the comeback, plus 210. Where are you leaning on this one, Aaron?
Well, from a betting standpoint, I think you have to go Chookagian. I mean, those odds, I think, are crazy. I mean, this is the thing about the flyweight division. And somebody needs to dig up the stat. I did it once, but it's been a while, so I haven't updated it. But when you take women that used to fight at bantamweight and put them against women that used to fight at strawweight, when they fight at middleweight, the fighter from the bantamweight division often wins the fight, more often than not. I think it's something like 60 or 70% of the time will win that fight. It might even be higher. And I think that when you look at those particular odds, I personally don't believe that she should be that big of a favorite. I thought it would be like minus 140, minus 150. I know Chookagian's coming off that bad loss to Andrade, and she's turning it around pretty quickly. Plus, she's talked about retirement and said that when she wants to start a family, that's going to be when she leaves the UFC. That said, I still think she's a very good fighter. She's going to be a lot bigger than Calvillo. And I would, if I'm just going to make a straight pick, I think Calvillo has a slight advantage. But I think looking at that particular line, that's a very, very good bet on Chookagian if you can get it at that number.
I agree. And this reminds me of this Shevchenko fight where, Antonina Shevchenko, that is, because she fought both sisters, when she lost to Valentina and she was a big underdog against Antonina Shevchenko. When you look at the difference in experience, it's not even close. I'm with you here. I think this should be closer to a pick'em because, Calvillo has a great win at flyweight over Jessica Eye. Good for her. I mean, that's awesome. I'm not going to take that away from her. And obviously, I think she is a little bit more well-rounded than Chookagian. But I did have a chance to speak to Katlyn Chookagian last week for Low Kick MMA. Talked to her about a couple things. Number one, the way she lost to Andrade was actually a liver shot. And she basically just described it as her body sort of went into shock. You sort of see what happens when you got shot. And she kind of just curled up a little bit. And it was just the beginning of the end. It's almost like getting the wind taken out of you in a way where it's like your body is just sort of reacting in a certain way and you can't do much about it. So not taking anything away from Andrade. That was a legit win. But still, that's one of those things that's kind of rare that doesn't happen too often. And then you look at the fact that Chukagian as well, like I said, I think she's had more wins in the division. She's a mainstay at flyweight. That's got to count for something. I mean, it's not like she's losing like devastatingly. I mean, outside of Andrade and Shevchenko, she hasn't been finished in her career, and she's got some solid wins overall. If you look at the division, including Calderwood, Maya, who's fighting for the title in the co-main event, Aldana. I mean, she's got a lot of solid wins on her resume here. So I am curious to see how that sort of pans out as well. And you mentioned the family talk. So I brought that up with Caitlin because I was like, do you feel like the media kind of blew that up a little bit? She's like, absolutely. She's like, of course I'm thinking about a family down the line, but not right now. I want to see how I do in these fights. She made it very clear that retirement is not something in the near future. She just wants to see how she performs in these next couple fights. I mean, look, if she goes out there and gets starched in the first round again, fair enough. Maybe that is a little bit more on the forefront in terms of her starting a family, but I didn't get that sense right now. She just got back from Fight Island. She's coming back and taking this fight on short notice. She's not one to, sit around and start talking about family. She's ready to go for this fight. And the other thing I'll point out, obviously, with Calvillo, she's not much of a finisher. If you look at a lot of her fights, they do tend to go the distance, and she doesn't have that type of power that Andrade does. So this idea that Calvillo is going to go out there and start Chukagian, that just won't happen in this fight, I don't think. So I'm with you there. The pick here for me as well is going to be Calvillo. I think she is more well-rounded, and I think she might edge out if it does go the distance, which I think it will. But Chukagian, if you're going to bet this fight, all the value's on her at this point, and I think this should be closer to a pick'em than it is sort of a 2-1, almost 3-1 favorite for Calvillo. So pick's going to be Calvillo, but the value for sure on this fight is on Caitlin Chukagian in this fight. Let's keep it rolling here. We're going to go to the men's welterweight division. We've got Mike Perry taking on a replacement in Tim Means right now on blitzbet.eu. We've got Mike Perry as the favorite at -147. Tim Means +120. Still a good replacement for Robbie Lawler. Tim Means is a guy you can never count on in a fight. He's always willing to stand and trade and take care of business here. What's your pick on this one, Aaron?
This is a fun fight for sure. I think I have to lean Tim Means in this one. I think that Tim Means, he's just a much smarter fighter on the feet. I think that Perry has that great power, and he's got really good technique, very underrated technique. But I do think that Tim Means is going to be able to utilize volume, which will automatically give him an advantage with the judges. When there's volume, and you don't get hit, if you get hit hard by Mike Perry, you're done. You're probably done for the night. If he can avoid taking big shots from Mike Perry and he can continue to put on volume, not to mention that if it gets to the ground, I think he's got a sizable advantage there. I just think Tim Means has more ways to win this fight. But you can say that about basically any Perry opponent. They have more ways to win the fight. But Mike Perry's got that one great weapon, which is I think his striking as a whole is solid. And I think he has underrated fight IQ. I really do. I think that when he's in there, he's always finding little ways to win. He's finding little ways to edge out his opponent by doing little things. But I have to give a slight lean to Tim Means in this one. I think he's just going to have more volume, and that if it does get to the ground, that he'll have an advantage. He's got those crazy chokes, and Perry's not easy to submit. But if Tim Means gets your neck, you're in trouble.
I hate to bore our audience, but I'm going the same way here. I really like Tim Means in this fight, just with, again, edge and experience. I think, you look at, people will point to the loss against Daniel Rodriguez where it's like, oh, he got finished in that fight. Well, listen to Tim Means. I did an interview with him for the Scrap after that fight. He talked about how he had a lot of stuff outside the cage, personal tragedy, all these things. And he said he went into that fight angry, and he paid the price for it against Daniel Rodriguez. But I thought the last fight against Staropoli, he looked outstanding. And you talk about his stand-up, he's got a good ground game. I think Means is the more well-rounded fighter in this fight. And I think people just look at Mike Perry and they think, oh, knockouts. I mean, great win over Mickey Gall, don't get me wrong, but Mickey Gall has 8 fights? And then you even go before that, you look at the win over Oliveira. Yeah, that's an okay win. Probably his best win is Paul Felder, but even that fight, Felder broke his arm in that fight, and it was I think it was a short notice fight because of it being at welterweight. So, I mean, you can't put too much stock into Mike Perry at this point. I just think with everything Perry's dealing with outside the cage and, camp switch-ups and all this different stuff that he's got going on, I mean, Tim Means is the guy who's got a lot more, to sort of zone in on at this point, whereas I think Perry's got way too much outside the cage to deal with as well. And just the fact that I think Means is more experienced and better on paper. So I think at underdog money right now, I think there's a lot of value on Tim Means. I'm going to pick him to win a decision here. Mike Perry is pretty tough to finish. I don't see him losing by knockout, say let's be honest here. Tim Means is not Jeff Neal, but I do see Means potentially winning a decision here. So maybe you look for the Tim Means by decision prop, but we'll see. I really like Tim Means as well. So glad we're on the same page on that one. All right, we've got 2 more fights to get through, both the title fights. Valentina Shevchenko, Jennifer Maia. We'll start there first, the flyweight championship fight. Right now on blitzbet.eu, you can get Valentina Shevchenko right now. Let's see if they've got it here. Do they not have odds for this? Hold on one second. We're going to look here. I see Antonina. Oh, yeah, we do. We do have it here. Yeah, that'd be surprising. I saw Antonina, and I thought maybe they didn't have it. But anyways, Valentina Shevchenko, -1429. The comeback on Jennifer Maia, +835. I mean, I get it. It's Valentina. She's been beating everyone, but where are you going in this one, Aaron?
Just looking up some props, because I think that's when you want to take Shevchenko, that's always your best bet, is to find a good prop bet that you're confident in. That being said, I think Jennifer Maia is a good fighter. Like, I really do think that she should not be this big of an underdog. That said, until somebody beats Shevchenko at flyweight, or at least makes her look human at flyweight, I understand why the line is what it is. The one that I was thinking about was Shevchenko by submission. Like, Shevchenko is sneaky with her subs, and I think that at plus 670, it's worth a flyer. I don't think that you're really going to look for a ton of really high level props in this one that are going to get you, give you a good comeback. I think, while Maia, I think, has good jiu-jitsu, I think that if it does get into that sort of situation, that Shevchenko's got a lot of tricks up her sleeve. And at plus 670, I mean, if you're going to throw a flyer and you want to have some action on this fight, that might be the way to do it. I do think, though, that Shevchenko inside, like, I don't know what the line on that is, but I do think that this fight does not go to a decision. I think that that prop would be good. I think that Shevchenko should be able to stop Maia inside the distance. So that's kind of the direction that I'd go in for this particular fight. If you're going to bet it straight up, I think it's dog or pass. I think that Maia actually has pretty solid value as an underdog, and that she's actually a very underrated fighter. But I would say that Shevchenko, if you're going to take her inside the distance.
Okay, we disagree on something here. Not on the pick. I'm obviously going on Shevchenko. Come on, guys. I'm not that crazy here. But I actually think this could go the distance, and let me explain why. So if you guys missed our interview here with Valentina here on Line Movement, you can check it out. We did it about a month ago before the fight. She talked about the leg injury. A lot of people forget she was supposed to fight Joanne Calderwood. Calderwood takes the Maia fight, loses. That's why Maia's getting the title shot. So I do wonder with that injury, how severe was it? Obviously, she feels, good enough to take this fight or whatever. But usually when a fighter's coming off an injury, maybe you're not going to see that killer instinct. And I think, being the champion and knowing the advantages she has, maybe she doesn't go for the finish. And with Jennifer Maia, she's only got one stoppage loss in her career, and that was way back in 2012. It was a 10-second finish by Sheila Gaff in that fight. So, Maia's proven to be pretty durable throughout his career. So I could see a potential of this going the distance. And if you bet Shevchenko by decision, the decision prop, it's around plus 200. So I think there's some value there. I know Aaron's going the other way, depending on who you like better here, which Canadian you like better here, me or Aaron, will depend on which prop that you want to go with. But I think there could be some value there. I think Shevchenko just wants to get the win. Also, let's not forget, just 2 fights ago, she went the distance with Liz Carmouche. It is, and even before that, Yen Jacek. I know this isn't the same fighter. Maia ended up losing 2 fights ago to Caitlin Chukagian. So that's one thing to consider as well. But I don't know. I think I have a feeling that this might go the distance. This might not be the type of finish that we're expecting in a fight like this. Now, saying that, I will point this out, and this does work to Aaron's favor, just because I'm trying to be transparent here, people. Jessica had never been finished in a fight in the UFC. Shevchenko did that. Caitlin Chukagian had never been finished in her career, period. Shevchenko did that. So keep that in mind, Valentina. It doesn't matter the opponent. She'll find the finish there. But I think this one might go the distance just with the injury. That's sort of what I'm thinking there. But obviously the pick is going to be Valentina Shevchenko in the co-main event. Let's get to the main event, Aaron. We got the flyweight title fight. Deiveson Figueiredo, Alex Perez, was supposed to be Cody Garbrandt. Garbrandt is out with an injury. In steps Alex Perez, who was supposed to fight Brandon Moreno. So he was already getting ready for this fight. And then they bumped him up to the main event. Love this main event. Very well deserving for Alex Perez. And looking on blitzbet.eu, Deiveson Figueiredo minus 312, Alex Perez plus 245. I'm picking Figueiredo in this fight. I think if it stays standing, he's got the better power. I think, he can do a lot with the striking. And we saw that in the last 2 fights with Benavidez, where, Benavidez is still a good fighter, and to dominate him the way he did, I just was so impressive there. But saying that, Alex Perez is an underdog. I mean, that's a little tempting. This is a guy that, is 5-1 in the UFC. I think just the one loss to Benavidez, and the fight before that he won getting into the Benavidez fight was an absolute destruction of Jose Shorty Torres. Till this day, we've still never seen anyone dominated that badly in terms of Jose Shorty Torres' career. Perez was totally on top of him in that fight. The last one was good with the leg kicks, obviously finishing Yusir Formiga in the first round with leg kicks, just chomped his leg down. Formiga couldn't even stand up and was able to get the W there. And there's a little bit of weird MMA math here with Perez getting the finish on Formiga, Figueiredo losing to Formiga, and then obviously Formiga having 2 wins over, Figueiredo having 2 wins over Benavidez, and Perez losing to Benavidez. So take that for what you will. But I think what's going to end up happening is this fight's going to stay standing. Figueiredo is going to be a little bit ahead in the striking, and I think you'll start to see him wear on those shots on Alex Perez, and Perez is going to wear out a little bit. I think 3rd or 4th round, you're going to see Figueiredo go for the kill and get the finish here. That's how I'm seeing this one, and I think there is some value on Figueiredo by knockout in this fight. I think the money's close to, I think it's like minus 130 or something like that for that prop. But where are you going in this one, Aaron? Because it's a really exciting main event.
I like the way you're thinking in terms of Figueiredo rounds 4, rounds 5. I'm sure the props on those are probably tremendous. Anytime you get a in round 4, in round 5 prop, they're always really big. I know that's kind of the damn Tom special is the late round props. That said, I think that it's a dog or pass situation for sure. And I think that Alex Perez, I mean, you mentioned his one losses to Benavidez. We have to remember that he got rocked by an unintentional clashing of heads, right? Like that. And whenever you ask Perez about that Benavidez fight, he gets angry because he said that result never would have happened if not for that clashing of heads, which really rattled him. And, Benavidez capitalized on him, and Benavidez is a great fighter. I just think that Perez is the type of guy that can give anybody a headache. He's a really underrated fighter. Right now, we saw those two back-to-back destructions, really, of Joseph Benavidez by Figueiredo, one of which was also kind of predicated by a clashing of heads, an unintentional clashing of heads, which Figueiredo kind of bragged about after that fight. He said, I've been headbutting people for years. It's like, okay, buddy. But regardless of that, I just think that you look at these two fighters, and I think that they're fairly evenly matched. I don't think that it should be that big of a gap in terms of the line. I think that Perez is the type of guy that can give Figueiredo some problems. We've also seen times where Figueiredo just doesn't show up for a fight. Like, that's happened before, where he just doesn't look himself. If that happens against Perez, Perez is going to capitalize. I think that if I were to make a bet in this fight, it would be Perez, just straight up as an underdog. I think there's a lot of value there, and that's the direction that I would go in. Figueiredo looked good, but he looked good against a Joe Benavidez that's kind of in the later years of his career. I know that Benavidez has beaten Perez, but you got to remember the circumstance behind that one. So I would say that Perez is my lean in this one in terms of a bet. In terms of a pick, I think you have to kind of lean Figueiredo. From what we've seen of Figueiredo, looks like he's really improved since he left Team Alpha Male. Actually, he's looked like a different fighter. He's looked way better. It looks like he's not overthinking things anymore, and that's when Figueiredo's at his absolute best, when he's kind of in berserker mode. But that's why if you look at those kind of late round props, like you mentioned, James, like Figueiredo round 4, Figueiredo round 5, you can certainly find some value there.
Yeah, great point. I think Perez absolutely has a chance in this fight. I want to reiterate that again. And I think, like Aaron was saying, the value definitely could be on him. Maybe you can figure out a hedge situation where you could bet, Figueiredo by knockout, because I don't think it'll go the distance. Maybe you put Perez in a parlay or something. I don't know. You could probably make the numbers work. People who are a lot smarter than me could probably figure that out. But yeah, that's exciting main event. Look, I know this isn't the greatest pay-per-view ever, but I'm excited for this one, and I'll definitely be watching on Saturday. Now, one fight, Aaron, we did not get to talk about, I'm going to go on a little rant here, is the Brandon Royval and Brandon Moreno fight, the Battle of the Brandon. It's a really important fight for the flyweight division. And a lot of people felt like Brandon Moreno should have got this title shot over Alex Perez. Instead, he is fighting Brandon Royval, who's just been on a roll this year. Back-to-back wins in the Octagon, especially that last win over Kai Kara France, where he finished him. And it's absolutely just a fireworks fight here. So I'm not complaining about where this fight is. It's on the prelims. I get it. You get it in front of the TV audience. You lead it into the pay-per-view. This is going to be a fantastic fight. The issue I do have, Aaron, is I'm already hearing rumblings that Cody Garbrandt, no matter what happens on Saturday, is going to get the next title shot. And I've been very much against this since they announced the original Figueiredo and Garbrandt fight. My issue with this is that it's very simple. Garbrandt has lost 4 of his last 5 fights, or 3 of his last 4, something like that. His last win over a Sunsao, don't get me wrong, great highlight reel finish, but it's not like he beat a guy in a Sunsao who was, on his way up to winning a title again. A Sunsao had some setbacks as well. I realize that Garbrandt's a former champion. I know that does hold weight in certain matchups, but at the same time, Garbrandt had been finished in a lot of fights previously. The Dillashaw knockout, the Pedro Munoz knockout, and now we're going to give him a title shot because he wants to go down and he was a former champion. I don't buy that logic. If we're going by that, then why weren't people outraged that Jose Aldo didn't get a title shot at bantamweight right away when he moved down? Because it's the same thing. He was a former champion. He was dominant for so long. If we're going by that as clout and using that to give people title shots, why was there no outrage with that? And people are saying, oh, well, the division needs this. Well, Aldo could have spiced up the division as well with the title shot as well too. So I don't really get the logic here. I hate this idea that we need to bring Garbrandt down to make the division exciting. There's plenty of exciting fighters in this fight, and you guys are going to see that on Saturday in some of the matchups. Not just that, Manuel Cape came over from Ryzen. There's a lot of promise right now in this division, and I would rather see the UFC reward fighters who have wins in that division as opposed to a guy who has 0 wins in the weight class and potentially getting the next title shot. I know it's not guaranteed, but the politics of this, Aaron. Garbrandt probably is going to get the winner here, and I don't think it's right to Brandon Moreno or Brandon Royval, depending on who wins that fight. The winner of that fight should fight for the title next, not Cody Garbrandt. I want to hear your thoughts on that, Aaron.
When you use the word should, you're putting meritocracy above promotion, and right. The UFC is a promotion. Everybody always looks at, this guy deserves it. This guy deserves it. None of that ever matters when it comes to the UFC. What matters is who's going to get the most publicity for that particular fight. Who's going to get the most promotion that you can at least make a case for. I mean, they're not going to take Jake Paul and have him face Figueiredo because people are going to buy the pay-per-view. But I think that with Garbrandt, he's been talking about a move to 125 for some time. I think that, you want to utilize his momentum after that last win over a Sunsao. I know Asuncao is not the biggest name, but Garbrandt's got a big following on social media. He's a marketable guy. I understand why they want to make the fight. Do I think that it's the right fight to make? No, but there have been a lot of situations where the UFC haven't made the right fight, the fight that should be made based on meritocracy, in favor of a fight that should be made. In favor of a fight that is good for promotional value. Like, look at Shevchenko versus Jędrzejczyk. Jędrzejczyk hadn't fought at flyweight in the UFC, got a title shot right away. And I thought that was the right fight to make at the time. I thought that's how you kind of advertise this division and get people to watch it. I think that's why they're bringing Garbrandt down. So I understand the mindset behind it. And Garbrandt's a great fighter. I mean, I don't think we should take anything away from Garbrandt. I'd like to see how he performs, at flyweight. And I think that if you were able to put him against maybe the winner of Moreno versus Royval and see how he looks at flyweight first, that might make a little more sense. That being said, I think that if you want to put a name at the top of that division, Figueiredo versus Garbrandt is a good one to make.
It is. I'll bring up your example with the flyweight division. That was a new division with Jędrzejczyk and Shevchenko fighting. I understand that. That makes sense. But flyweight's been around for a while. I know Demetrius Johnson left, but at the same time, like, people should know who's in this division, and it's on the UFC as well.
At this point, don't you agree? Like, since
it is,
DJ left, the division was totally up in the air. It feels like it's been basically reborn. It kind of like went on hiatus for a bit.
I agree. I just don't think Garbrandt's the guy to do it. I think people are making him out like this guy's Conor McGregor. We were almost talking about, is Cody going to be able to continue his career? And thank God he got that win over Asuncao in his last fight, because it wasn't looking good for Cody with some of the matchmaking there. Like, I think he had fought any other bantamweight, outside of Asuncao, I think he might lose. So I get where you're coming from. I know this is a promotional thing where they want to build up the division. I just think it's a slap in the face to guys like Moreno and whoever who've been working their way up and trying to get it done. And you're right. There's no such thing as deserve in MMA. It's all about promotion and all that stuff. I just don't think you're going to get that much more of a draw with a Garbrandt. I know he's got a lot of social media followers, but I don't know if that necessarily translates to viewership. We'll see. But I just think you got to reward the guys who are putting the time in the division. But I'm sort of an old school guy that way. And I know people are going to get mad at me for even suggesting this, but hey, I got to go against the grain sometime. We are going to be wrapping things up here with the show. Really appreciate Aaron coming on the program. Aaron, why don't you just let people know where they can get a hold of you on social media, what you got coming up this week on the TSN MMA show, and anything else? The floor is yours, man.
Right, it's at Aaron Bronsteter on Twitter. TSN actually has launched a new betting vertical called TSN Edge. So if you're interested in line movement and all of the great content that they put out, and you want to look at kind of what we're doing over at TSN in terms of that space, we've launched that, and I would appreciate if people check out my videos on the TSN Edge vertical. I think that hopefully they can give you some insight as to what's going on in MMA from that perspective. Dan, Tom, and I, we're always chopping it up before every card starts on the Periscope feed. And I think that you, Dan, Tom, Daniel Levy, you guys have some really great insights in terms of the betting side of things. So Line Movement is lucky to have you guys, and I appreciate you having me on.
Look at this, Aaron fishing for a free drink the next time we see each other. I see how it is. No, I appreciate the kind words. We love working here. We've been killing it with the interviews over the last bit. I don't know if you checked out the channel, but for this card alone, we've got Alex Perez, Valentina Shevchenko, Alan Jouban, Jared Gooden. The list goes on. And then in terms of other interviews that we've done over the last couple of weeks, we've had Bryce Mitchell, we had Curtis Blades, Jack Hermanson, Leon Edwards, a lot of really good content here on the Line Movement channel. So I encourage our viewers, if you're watching this right now, hit that subscribe button. You won't miss any of our interviews. We're doing interviews every week. Make sure you hit that like button. All that stuff goes a very long way. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Anjos Sports. And like I said, subscribe to the Line Movement YouTube channel. We do the show every Monday at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be changing up the format going forward starting next week, but I'm definitely think it's going to be something really worthwhile for you guys to check out. So just keep that in mind. Quick shout out to my producer, Jordan, who always does a fantastic job behind the scenes. I hope you guys enjoy UFC 255 this Saturday. We'll be back next week. And I want to thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you next week.